Hello, so today I'm going to be talking about transforming options within Photoshop, as well as some other things that we're going to be talking about a little bit. That's a little bit more AI related, that are actually really kind of cool to work with. So what I'm going to, we've been introduced to some of the things like rotating and scale, which it's like if you were to go up to like edit and transform scale, or if you go to free transform or whatever, you know that you can scale anything that you want, whether it's this way, or grabbing something and scaling it up or down. Pretty standard stuff. But if I go up to edit, transform, you'll see that there's things like skew and distort and perspective and warp and rotate 180, rotate 90 degrees clockwise, counterclockwise, and flip horizontal and flip vertical. Those are things that we can kind of like use. Should be self-explanatory in some instances. But what I want to really introduce you to is something that we've used in the past, or what I haven't used in the past, but it's actually a relatively new tool to Photoshop, and that is called the Puppet Warp. So if I go to Edit and go to Puppet Warp, what it allows me to do is I'm going to zoom in on this girl here. It gives me a cursor that looks like a little push pin. Now, Puppet Tool is actually more like the old style puppets that were on strings. And those types of puppets, you move the arms and legs and stuff using like strings. Think of it a little more like that. But what we're going to be putting is where each of those string points are. One I'm going to put maybe on the hand here. One I'm going to put maybe on the armpit there. That part, this part, and I always have to have one in the center, as well as where the hip, knee, and foot go. And over here, knee and foot. So how I have this work is I can actually go ahead and go to any one of these points. I don't have to choose a new tool or anything, and I can click, hold, and drag, and you can kind of morph it, or actually kind of like make it work a little bit more in your favor. And you'll notice that if I adjust some things, you'll see that it moves other points as well. So if I were to take this, move it down, like let's say I'm going to have this foot kind of go all the way down here. Sometimes it doesn't work as well, but you can kind of get an idea. All right. Now, sometimes I want, like, see this foot here, if I were to bring this out a little bit more this way, and I cover the leg, what we can do is you can actually use an option called pin depth. So, like, let's say, for instance, I wanted this foot to kind of go behind the other leg. If I go up to the very top, you'll see there's an option called pin depth. If I choose that, like right now it said this first button here, sets that pin to be above everything else. This one will set it to go lower. So if I choose this a couple of times, you see how that foot just goes back behind that leg. All right. So I've got that. All right. Now to apply these, you can go ahead and you can move to a different tool or whatever, but I do want to show you some other things here. So like there are different types of modes, like normal is what we have. You can set it to rigid, which tends to get a little bit more kind of like to the point of what this is. You can choose distort, which really kind of like distorts everything. So it's like if I pull this out, you'll see how it's actually coming forward. Like if you want to create a Mr. Fantastic type of thing, you can do that as well. I'm going to go back to rigid, and you can see you still have a distort here. So I'll bring that back here. Okay. So you can choose these things. I'm going to undo that because I want to choose this. You can bring those forward, whatever you want to do to kind of like micro adjust these to make it look a little bit better. Okay. Just like that. Now, of course, her leg is kind of like weird, so I'm going to actually move this a little bit forward little micro adjustments here can make it look a little different. And then basically what I can show you is how this actually works. So if I choose the checkbox that says show mesh, you can see that each of these items uses a mesh that kind of goes over the drawing there, the selection that I have. All right, I can expand it, basically expanding that mesh to kind of go farther, or I can actually have it go further in if I wanted to. But I might set it to actually say 1 pixel here. All right, that allows me to see that mesh that's being portrayed here. You can choose different areas. I'm going to turn that mesh off for a second, and you'll see that it kind of like went back to what I had. So I'm going to bring this back down here. Sometimes if I want that foot to kind of like rotate a little bit, I can go up here where it says rotate, and I can choose a fixed rotation. Like right now, I'm going to set this to maybe 90 degrees. Okay, and what it does is it kind of rotates around that point. So this particular point here, I'm going to bring that, and I'm going to, oops, I don't want to do that. So I'm going to choose this, and I'm going to push this in the back, just like that. All right. So with that, maybe let's go with the 100, not 1,000. Or let's try 150. Too much. 120. That's a little better. Okay. So I've got all the rotations that I can actually do with it. To apply all that stuff, you can go ahead and hit the checkbox here, or you can go to a different tool, and I'll apply that there. So that's the Puppet Warp tool. So it allows you to kind of like adjust things, see what it does. And it does a fabulous job of those types of things. So one of the things that I want to kind of do is like you have this girl here, and I want to make it look a little bit more realistic. So what I want to do is I want to add a shadow to the background. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to use this layer. I'm going to go down to FX, and I'm going to choose drop shadow, because there's a way of actually doing this. Like this doesn't work for every option in the drop shadow area or in the layer style area, but it does work with drop shadow in these instances. So right here I set blend to multiply, opacity at 90, and I'm not going to worry too much about the angle for this one, because what I'll see is you'll see what I'm going to do here in just a second. So I'm going to hit OK, and it does apply that layer style. If I were to right click on it, you can see what might happen is it can say, okay, there's this option called create layer. And if I hit create layer, I would hit OK, basically saying that some of the aspects of the effects panel cannot be reproduced with layers. So, which is what I told you. All right, so what I did was I have this layer here, but I also created a drop shadow layer. So with the drop shadow layer, now I want to actually create this kind of like shadowy type of option of the girl here. So I'm going to go up to Edit, Transform, and there's an option called Distort. All right, so if I choose Distort, it'll give me this type of thing, which looks like the free transform tool, or free transform, but it's not. It's a way of distorting. So if I were to go to one of these handles and just drag it down, and go here, drag this down, what I'm doing is I'm creating this kind of like shadowy figure. So if I were to pull this a little bit this way, just like so, right, and play around with the adjustments of it, just like so, I can hit return and allow me to distort that figure to come down here. Now, it still doesn't look very good, so I'm going to go up to Filter. Now, Filter has all kinds of different things that you can actually utilize, and I encourage you to kind of like play around with some of them. And I'm going to go to blur, and there's an option called Gaussian blur, which I love Gaussian blur. It actually gives you a lot more choices when it comes, or a lot more control of your Gaussian blur, or your blur. So I'm going to increase that blurriness a little bit. As you can see, it gets blurred more, and I'll hit OK. And I'm going to adjust my opacity some. So I'm going to bring this down more, so it can actually show something like a little shadow that's there. All right. So the transforming options are those. Those are great little options. But what I'm also going to show you are a couple of other areas. So I'm going to go to my background layer, and I'm going to go up to image. Like sometimes, like this particular image is very square, but what if I wanted to make it a lot more horizontal? There are some features within Photoshop that actually will save you a lot of time. So it's like if I were to go to image, there's an option called canvas size. So if I choose that, now there is a difference between canvas and image size. Image size and canvas size are two separate things, but canvas size will change the document layout. Image size will change the actual image size. So be aware of that. So let's say I want to make this a very strong horizontal. So I might go up to, let's say, 40 inches. Hit OK. And I'll zoom out. And you'll see it leaves these like white bars. If I were to take my rectangular marquee tool, and I'm going to go ahead and select this with a little bit of that background there, and choose that. Both these options, I'm holding down Shift and selecting both areas. If I go up to Edit, there's an option called Content Aware Fill. So if I choose that, what it's doing is allowing me to kind of like basically paint in or not paint in what I don't want. So it's like here, it's just looking at different areas. I'm going to make sure that it's choosing areas that I want it to, which is all set in green. So you can kind of see what it's doing here. It's like basically filling in what's there. And I can play around with some of the settings if I want to, but I'll go ahead and hit apply. All right, let it think for a second, and it'll go back to your image. And hit OK. And then I will deselect. So if you look at it, it's like not too bad. If you wanted to get a little bit, if you have little berry areas that you wanted to kind of like work with, you can do that. Do the content aware fill. Sometimes it just doesn't work out as well. So I'm going to undo all that. And I'm going to go up to Edit. And there's an option called Generative Fill. It is also down here at the very bottom underneath the image. Now, Generative Fill will allow you to kind of like prompt what you want in there. So it's like if I go ahead and say fill with, or I would like to say, I'm going to say extend background. I'll just say that, see what it does. I'll go ahead and hit generate. And what it will do is, taking a minute, it's going to use AI. AI is going to look at the scene. It's going to make a judgment as far as what it's going to look like. And here is one of 3 options. So it's like this looks a little bit better than what the generative fill is. So if I go to my second one, which you'll see here, it's got 3 choices here, which you can choose that. You can choose this one. You can even, if none of those work, just go ahead and hit generate, and it'll come up with 3 more options that you can actually utilize. After a second, there it is. And you can see it does a pretty decent job of creating things that kind of like fill in that area. So it'll allow you to kind of like extend the photo to make it look more horizontal if you're trying to fit it within a publication that you need to fit it in at. All right. Now, what it also does is it does not touch the background area. It does actually create a smart object, like right here, and basically generates a layer and masks it to kind of like fill in that area. So if I were to disable that layer mask, you can kind of see it doesn't really do much, other than it basically made a copy of that image right in there. So, all right. So that's the generative AI function that actually helps out majorly in many instances. Now, I am going to show you another area that actually will have a lot of like controversy. One thing you want to do is not use this as a function for a design. If you want an image or something like that, go find one. However, if I were to hit new, or actually, let's go ahead. I'm going to hide this, the girl here. And I'm actually going to hide that too. And I'm going to make a new layer. And I'm going to go up to Edit, Generate Image. So what this does is it gives you an AI prompt that allows you to kind of like come up with anything that will basically you want it to work in. Or basically anything that you wanted to kind of like your creativity. As long as you're describing it well, you can work with it. So right now I'm going to set up, let's say, generate a image, futuristic dark cityscape with from a rooftop, like so. Content, art, photo, and you can set effects, and I'll go ahead and hit generate, and we'll see what we get. So it takes a minute for it to come up with those type options, and it's going to put in a like so. So it's like if I wanted to put my girl back in here, let's say, well, we have to rearrange the layers, so I'm going to bring this down. Like so, you can put her in there, and you can see some of the other options here. So if you don't like any of those, update your description, and then you can hit generate. And what it's doing is it's using AI to create these images for you. However, again, this is not something that you're going to want to use on everything. It's an option to give you inspiration, and you can go to like any of the stock imagery that I've shown in the past lectures to be able to kind of like get images that you want. All right. So I'm going to end that here. So I will see you in the next video.